I woke up on the oil rig last week, feeling lost and confused. I blinked in the dim light of the sleeping quarters. I'd never done this kind of work before, but I needed the money. The first day was fine. I enjoyed the salty air and the sound of the ocean. Then, on my second night, I heard thumps. It felt like something heavy was hitting the walls. I thought it was just the rig moving. But as the night went on, the thumps got louder. It felt wrong, like the whole place was alive in a way I didn't understand. The next day, I noticed the crew's strange behavior. They barely looked at me. When I passed by, they'd stop talking. I felt like an intruder in a world I didn't belong in. It weighed on me. Was I imagining things? I wasn't sure anymore. That night, the whispers began. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Jake? I heard my name clear as day. I shot up in bed, my heart racing. I listened, but the sounds faded away like they never happened. I tried talking to the others about it. "Have you guys ever heard anything weird?" I asked one of the men. He just shrugged and turned away, like I was crazy. The more I asked, the more isolated I felt. I stared out at the ocean, trying to shake off the unease. The next night was worse. I sat up, listening hard. The whispers surged again. They felt close, like they were right beside me. I got out of bed, my legs shaky, and crept down the dimly lit corridor. The metal beneath my feet groaned and shifted. Every shadow felt wrong. I turned the corner and saw flickering lights further down the hall. I squinted, hoping to see someone. Instead, it was empty. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn back. I took a step, but hesitated. What if something was lurking there? "Jake, don't go," the voice came again, a soft plea. I froze. I felt cold all of a sudden. My stomach turned. "Who's there?" I called, my voice echoing off the walls. No answer. Just silence. I felt exposed, vulnerable. Then came a rustling, followed by shadows darting away. Panic washed over me. I turned, ready to run. My heartbeat was thunderous. I didn't care anymore. I needed to escape. I didn't understand what was happening, but it felt like they were hiding something from me. As I moved back toward my sleeping quarters, the whispers picked up again. They felt like warning bells now. I fumbled with the door, my hands clammy. I glanced back down the hall, but nobody followed. Was I really alone, or were they watching me? I slammed the door shut and leaned against it. I couldn't shake the feeling that they didn't want me to leave. I was trapped, surrounded by whispers and shadows. It felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't wake up from. I sat in the dark, listening to the sounds that haunted me, waiting for morning to come. The next morning came with a harsh light, and I woke up feeling exhausted. The whispers had faded, but the weight of what I experienced hung over me like a thick fog. I glanced at the clock. It was late. I forced myself out of bed, needing to shake off the lingering dread. As I dressed, I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. I needed to stay focused on work. I stepped outside, the salty breeze ruffling my hair. The crew was already busy, their faces shadowed with concentration. I absorbed the sounds of machinery and the sea, hoping it would calm my mind. I approached one of the men, Mark. He was typically friendly, but today he barely glanced my way. I hesitated, feeling the cold bite of rejection again. Just as I was about to turn back, he caught my eye and frowned. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "You need to keep your head down. They're watching." I blinked, unsure what he meant. "Who?" I asked, scanning the area for anyone paying special attention to me. He leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "You heard the whispers too, didn't you?" I felt a chill ripple up my spine. "You heard them? Last night?" He nodded, looking over his shoulder nervously. "You shouldn't ask questions, Jake. They don't like it. Just don't provoke them." Before I could respond, he hurried away, leaving me in a haze of confusion and fear. Who were they? What did he mean by provoking? My mind raced. I needed more answers, but how could I get them without drawing attention? That afternoon, I busied myself with tasks, trying to ignore the unease creeping back in. Back inside the rig, the thumps returned, echoing even louder than before. It felt as if something was moving behind the walls, thrumming like a heartbeat. I glanced at my coworkers, who seemed unbothered, but every fiber in me screamed to flee. Later, I found myself staring at the entrance to the darkened corridor, the same corridor from last night. I was drawn to it, but terror held me back. I could almost hear the voice again, clear as day. "Jake, don't go." I took a deep breath and made my way toward the corridor, the shadows seeming to sway with my every step. My heart raced. What was waiting for me at the end? The whispers grew louder, blending into a cacophony. They felt urgent. As I rounded the corner, I caught sight of something, a door ajar at the end of the hall, light seeping through. I peered into the room, my pulse quickening. Inside, I saw a collection of old photographs pinned to the wall. Faces I didn't recognize, but the expressions were haunting. They stared back at me, and a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the power flickered, plunging the corridor into darkness. I held my breath, feeling the weight of something standing behind me. Fear clawed at my throat. Then, everything went dark. I jolted upright, gasping for air as fragments of dreams faded into the dark void surrounding me. The corridor was gone, and I was back in my cramped room on the rig, drenched in sweat. I needed to shake this off. There had to be a logical explanation. I rubbed my eyes and took a deep breath. The clock on the wall read 2:37 a.m. My heart raced as I realized I had been out cold for hours. Judging by the silence, everyone else was sleeping. I climbed out of bed and slid on my boots, convinced that I needed to investigate. The shadows outside my door were thick, but I couldn't ignore the pull to understand what was happening. I crept down the hallway, the memory of the photographs still haunting me. Each step felt heavy, the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I reached the corridor again, illuminated only by the faint light from an emergency exit sign. My mind flashed back to Mark's warning, "They're watching." A shudder ran through me, but I pressed on. The door I had seen before was still ajar. I approached cautiously, feeling the air shift with an almost electric tension. Peering inside, I found the room entirely different. The photographs were gone, replaced with rusty tools and debris scattered across the floor. It felt wrong, like a scene from a nightmare I had yet to fully wake from. That's when I saw it. A small, battered notebook lay half hidden beneath a scrap of metal. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. I flipped it open, my breath hitching in my throat. Scrawled inside were frantic notes, doodles of strange symbols, and hurried scribbles detailing a pattern like an obsession. Words like escape, claimed, and lost jumped out at me. My pulse quickened as I realized these were not the writings of an ordinary worker. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the rig, causing the metal walls to vibrate. I froze, panic surging through my veins. The noise seemed to come from the same corridor where I now stood. I bolted upright, notebook clutched in my hand. The warning rang in my mind louder than ever. They don't like it. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows at the other end of the corridor, a silhouette I couldn't make out. I squeezed the notebook tightly, heart racing, and took a step back. I wanted to run, but my feet felt stuck in place. "Jake," the voice called softly, almost a whisper. It sent chills down my spine, familiar yet unsettling. "You shouldn't be here." It was Mark. I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. Instead, I willed myself to remember the notebook in my hands. I was still missing pieces, but now I couldn't ignore what was happening. I needed to know who Mark really was and why he warned me. "Get out," he said finally, stepping closer. "Please, just go before they find you here." But where was there to go? I could feel the weight of eyes on me again. As fear gripped my chest, I had no choice but to confront whatever was lurking in the dark corners of the rig. I wasn't leaving without answers. I stood frozen in the dark, watching as Mark moved closer. His face was lined with tension, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to leap out from the shadows. I could barely breathe, the notebook heavy in my hand, filled with secrets I didn't yet understand. "Mark, what's going on?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What do you mean, they?" He hesitated for a moment, the shadows obscuring his expression. "You're not safe here, Jake. This place is—" He stopped short, glancing down the corridor as if sensing something. "We need to get out, now." Before I could protest, he turned and started down the corridor, motioning for me to follow. My gut twisted, torn between fear and the desperate need for answers. I briefly glanced back at the room, the notebook pulling me in like a lifeline. But half-formed thoughts of truth and understanding pushed me to keep moving. As I hurried after Mark, I noticed the temperature drop. A chill swept through the corridor, raising goosebumps on my skin. The clang I had heard earlier faded into the background, but a low hum buzzed in my ears, setting my nerves on edge. Mark stopped abruptly, pressing his back against the wall, his breath quickening. "Listen," he whispered, eyes wide. I strained to hear anything over the pounding of my heart. Then I saw it, a flicker of light at the far end of the hallway, like a flame dancing in the darkness. Instinct kicked in. "What is that?" I whispered, my throat dry. "It's not what you think. We have to move." Mark pressed himself closer to the wall, urging me to do the same. As we continued in silence, the light pulsed rhythmically, drawing nearer. Each pulse felt like it was seeping into my bones, feeding off my fear. We reached a junction in the corridor. To the left, I could see the flickering light, and to the right there was another door slightly ajar, a sliver of dark inviting us in. "We can't go that way," I argued, fear tightening my chest. "The light!" Mark grabbed my arm, urgency written all over his face. "Trust me, it's worse if we go toward it." I hesitated only for a moment before stepping into the shadows of the nearby room. The door creaked as it closed behind us, sealing off the glowing light. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the world around me. Inside, the air felt stale and thick. It was dark, but I could make out the outlines of what seemed to be storage crates stacked high. I turned to Mark. "What is this place?" He ran a hand through his hair, sweat glistening on his forehead. "It's a hold. Not everyone on this rig is what they seem. People go missing, Jake. They've been taken." The words sank in, heavy and unsettling. My mind raced back to the notebook, to the scribbled notes. It all felt connected. I needed to ask more, but the humming noise outside the door intensified, vibrating through the metal walls. Suddenly, a sharp bang echoed. The sound reverberated through the space, making my stomach twist. "They know we're here," Mark said, eyes wide with fear. "We can't stay." Before I could respond, the door shook violently, rattling against the frame. The urgency surged through me like a jolt of electricity. Now I had no choice but to confront whatever was hunting us. I took a deep breath. "Okay, then what's our next move?" I asked, ready to face whatever was on the other side. But just as Mark opened his mouth to answer, the door burst open, and we were met with a shadowy figure standing frozen in the entrance. The figure in the doorway was a silhouette, a dark outline against the flickering lights behind it. I barely had a moment to register the shape before Mark pulled me back, pressing me against the wall. My heart raced, hammering against my chest as panic flared within me. "Mark, who is that?" I whispered, barely able to contain my fear. "I don't know, but we need to stay quiet," he replied, his voice a low murmur. He was tense, muscles coiled like a spring, ready to react. The figure moved slowly, like it was testing the air or searching for something. I strained to see more, but the shadows cloaked any defining features. My gaze flicked to the door, our only escape, and then back to Mark. I felt trapped, cornered between uncertainty and the lurking threat just a few feet away. A low grumble emanated from the figure, a sound so guttural it sent chills creeping down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," it rasped, the words slicing through the tension. "How does it know we're here?" I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. "It knows because it sees everything," Mark whispered back, his demeanor shifting to one that seemed almost resigned. "We need to move before it." Before he could finish, the figure lunged forward, shadowy limbs stretching as it barreled into the room. Instinct kicked in. Without thinking, I grabbed Mark's arm and we turned to dash for the back of the room, searching for an option beyond the looming threat. I spotted a narrow gap between the stacked crates. "This way!" I shouted, pulling Mark behind me. We squeezed through, my heart racing as the figure let out an ear-splitting shriek that echoed through the hold. The crates trembled as the sound reverberated, and I risked a glance back, in time to see the creature slam into them, sending wooden boxes crashing to the ground. I felt the vibration beneath my feet and knew we had only seconds before it found us again. We stumbled out of the narrow passage and found ourselves in a wider area. Dim lights flickered above, revealing more stacks of crates, but we had no time to explore. The shrieks faded into an angry growl as the figure emerged from the wreckage, eyes like glowing coals piercing through the darkness. "Mark, what now?" I gasped, breathless and terrified. "We need to find another exit," he shouted, scanning the room frantically. But then something caught his attention, a small window near the ceiling, just big enough for a desperate escape. "Up there," he pointed, determination flooding his voice. I felt a surge of hope. "Let's go," I responded, adrenaline flooding my veins. We rushed toward the wall, the creature's growls growing louder as it pursued us, relentless. Once I reached the wall, I jumped, using my hands to grab hold of a crate, and pulled myself up. I could feel the creature getting closer, the air heavy with its ominous presence. "Come on, Mark," I called out, urging him on. His hands latched onto the edge, and he climbed up beside me. Just as we began to hoist ourselves up, the creature lunged again, its dark form crashing against the crates below us. I felt the jolt through the wood as Mark and I scrambled to the narrow opening, urgency propelling us forward. Then, as I finally reached the window, the last thing I saw was the shadow lunging for us as everything went dark. I jolted awake, a startled gasp escaping my lips. The air was thick with oil and metal, and the sharp smell overwhelmed me for a moment. Blinking against the harsh overhead lights, my heart pounded in rhythm with the echoes of chaos still ringing in my ears. Mark was beside me, sprawled on the cold, hard floor, his face pale but alive. Relief washed over me. We were out of that room, but where exactly were we? I pushed myself up, trying to take in my surroundings. We were in a narrow corridor, stretching away into the dim light. The walls were steel, and the floor slick with oil. "Mark," I whispered, shaking him gently, "are you okay?" He groaned, rubbing his temples. "I think so. What happened?" "I'm not sure. We escaped, I think." My words trailed off as a chill crept down my spine. The creature, the shrieks, anguish twisted in my gut. That thing was right behind us. Mark struggled to his feet, looking around. "We need to get out of here, now." I nodded, and together we stumbled down the corridor, every step echoing against the walls. My instinct screamed that we were still in danger. With every flickering light overhead, I half expected the figure to come smashing through, teeth bared and anger palpable. But nothing followed. No guttural growls, no frantic shouts, just the ominous silence that hung over the rig. We reached a small door on the left, slightly ajar. Cautiously, we peeked inside. The room appeared to be some sort of control room. Monitors flickered with static. Levers and buttons lined the walls. I turned to Mark, my unease escalating. "What if there's someone here? What if they know what happened?" "Then we need to find answers," he replied, forcing confidence I didn't feel. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Just as I stepped into the room, something caught my eye on one of the monitors. A flicker of movement outside. My heart raced as I squinted at the screen, trying to get a better look. "Mark, look," I pointed, breathless. "Over there." He leaned closer, and I could see it too now. There was another figure, distant but unmistakably human, moving outside on the rig's exposed balcony. They walked with purpose, moving between stacked crates, always glancing back, as if expecting something or someone to come after them. "Do you think they saw us?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mark's eyes narrowed. "I think they might be our way out. We should go after them." There was a sudden loud clang from behind us, making us jump. I whipped around, and my stomach dropped. The door we had just entered now stood ajar, swinging at a strange angle. It felt as if something on the other side was trying to break through. "Mark, we have to move, now!" I yelled, and without a second thought, we bolted toward the rear exit. The urgency in the air was thick as we rushed out into the open, hearts racing. I had no idea what awaited us outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the real nightmare was just beginning. We burst onto the balcony, the cold air biting at my skin. The sound of metal creaking beneath me felt like a warning. I scanned the area, searching for the figure I had seen on the monitors. "Where are they?" Mark whispered, his breath visible in the frigid air. "I don't know," I replied, heart hammering. I stepped closer to the edge, peering into the dark depths below. The rig loomed overhead, imposing and alien, like a monstrous creature ready to consume us. Suddenly, a shout broke the silence. "Hey, over here!" I turned to see a man waving frantically from a stack of crates to our left. He looked disheveled, wild-eyed, but relief flooded me. Maybe he knew a way out. "Come on," I urged Mark, pulling him toward the figure. The distance felt like a mile, the joy of seeing another human shadowed by fear. We had to hurry. As we approached, the man stumbled back, a look of terror spreading across his face. "No, you can't come this way." "What? Why?" I asked, my voice shaking. But before he could respond, a loud crash came from behind us, echoing through the rig. I spun around, and my blood ran cold as something dark and hulking emerged from the doorway we had just fled. "Run! It's coming!" the man shouted, his voice now urgent. He sprinted toward the end of the balcony, leaving us no choice but to follow. We dashed after him, adrenaline filling my veins. As we reached the stack of crates, I glanced over my shoulder, and what I saw sent dread crashing over me. The creature, a grotesque mass of limbs and jagged teeth, had breached the doorway, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Keep moving!" Mark yelled, pulling me toward the man. We squeezed between the crates, breaths ragged. "Get down," the stranger instructed, pushing us low as we huddled behind shelter. I could hardly breathe, the fear gnawing at me with every second that passed. "What is that thing?" I gasped, my eyes wide with terror. "Something we shouldn't have disturbed," he said grimly. "We need to find the control room. It's our only chance." "Control room?" I repeated, feeling the weight of that earlier decision. "We were just there. What do you mean?" His expression tightened with urgency. "It controls everything, the doors, the security system. If we can get in, we might be able to lock it out." Before I could respond, the creature roared, filling the air with an otherworldly sound that set my nerves on fire. Mark's hand gripped mine tightly, pulling me back into the fray. It was now or never. We had to make it back to that room. "Follow me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I looked at the stranger. "And you better know how to use those controls properly." He nodded, and we made a break for it, racing back toward the door. Then, everything went dark. I jolted awake, gasping for air. The cold metal of the rig prickled against my skin, and the strong smell of diesel filled my nostrils. I blinked several times, trying to shake off the disorientation. Where was I? "Mark?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. Panic twisted my stomach when there was no answer. I pushed myself up, scanning the dimly lit area around me. I was lying on the floor of what looked like a small storage room. Boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls, and the faint sound of machinery hummed somewhere in the distance. The memory of the creature flooded back, its jagged teeth and glowing eyes haunting me. I scrambled to my feet, scanning the room for any sign of Mark or the stranger. The wall to my left had a door, slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled voices beyond. I took a tentative step toward the door, heart racing. Should I stay hidden, or should I find out who was out there? My curiosity overpowered my fear. I edged closer, careful to stay quiet. As I reached the door, I peered through the gap. I froze. Mark was there, alive, but against the far wall, looking shaken. Standing across from him was the stranger we had met. Their voices were low, urgent whispers, but I could catch snippets. "No time to explain," the stranger said. "We need to move. It's still hunting us." I felt a surge of relief and dread all at once. They had to stick together. I pushed the door open cautiously, and it creaked louder than I had hoped. Both heads snapped in my direction. "Are you all right?" Mark asked, rushing over to me. His eyes searched mine, and I could see how much he was holding back. "I'm fine," I said quickly, though I didn't feel it at all. "What's going on? Where's that thing?" "It got inside the control room. It can control the lights and doors now," Mark replied, urgency coloring his voice. "We have to get out of here before it finds us." "That's exactly what I was trying to tell him," the stranger chimed in, casting a wary glance at the door. "If we can make it to the emergency exit, we might stand a chance. But we have to stick together. No more splitting up." I nodded, the gravity of our situation washing over me again. The creature was still out there, and now it had an advantage. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Okay, let's go," I said, trying to project confidence. "Lead the way." We moved cautiously toward the door. The hallway outside was dim, illuminated only by blinking red emergency lights. It was too quiet. I could almost hear my heart pounding. Just as we stepped into the corridor, the emergency lights flickered, and I caught a glimpse of movement at the far end. My stomach dropped. "That's it!" Mark shouted, pointing. Without thinking, I sprinted forward, adrenaline fueling my legs. The stranger and Mark followed close behind. We darted down the hall, racing toward what felt like a flimsy hope. Then the lights went out completely. Panic surged through me as darkness enveloped us. I could hear the frantic whispers of Mark and the stranger behind me, but all I could think about was the monster lurking just out of reach. In the pitch black, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. Suddenly, something slammed into the wall just beside me. I barely stifled a scream as the terrifying growl echoed through the void. I had no idea how close it was. All I knew was that we had to keep running. I stumbled blindly in the dark, my hands reaching out until they hit the cool surface of the wall. The growl echoed in my ears, and for a moment I thought I might lose my grip on reality. I could feel the adrenaline rushing, every breath sharper and shallower than the last. "Mark, where are you?" I called out, my voice shaky and uncertain. "Right here," Mark replied, his voice strained. I felt a rush of relief at the sound. "Stay close," Stranger urged as he moved alongside us. I couldn't tell where the danger lurked anymore. It could be right beside us, pacing silently in the dark. We zigzagged down the corridor, desperately searching for the emergency exit. My feet pounded against the metal floor, and the sound reverberated around us, almost mocking our fear. I could hear panicked breaths as we moved, but then I felt something shift in the air. Suddenly, the emergency lights flared back to life, and I squinted against the harsh brightness. It was disorienting, but I instantly scanned our surroundings. "We need to keep moving," the stranger shouted, urgency flooding his words. But something caught my eye, the way a door slammed shut at the opposite end of the corridor. My heart raced again. "That door! It just closed!" I exclaimed, pointing in its direction. "Don't look back. Focus," Mark insisted, pulling me forward. I felt the tension beam between us, but even as Mark moved me along, I couldn't shake the thought of what had just happened. This place was alive, trapping us in. The stranger suddenly stopped, his eyes wide. "We have to go back. We can't be seen," he said, voice dropping to a whisper. "Are you insane? We can't," Mark shot back, frustration and fear mixing. The stranger glared at him, the silence between them thickening with unspoken tension. Then the ground shook. A metallic clanking echoed through the hallway, and a warning siren began to wail around us. My instincts kicked in, and I felt the heat of panic ignite in my chest. Then I realized something was coming. "Run!" I screamed. Mark grabbed my hand, and we dashed past the stranger. I didn't look back, but the sound of heavy footsteps reverberated, echoing louder with each step we took. We reached an intersection in the corridor. My heart sank. "Which way?" "Left," the stranger yelled. I hesitated as we turned, the lights flickering again like a cruel joke. The hallway twisted and turned, and I could feel our time slipping away. Finally, a large steel door loomed ahead, the emergency exit. A glimmer of hope sparked within me. But as we approached, I locked eyes with Mark, and the expression on his face told me everything I needed to know. "It won't open," he panted, tugging at the handle. Panic surged again. The heavy thud of something colliding against the other side made my blood run cold. "Get back! Move!" I cried, and we stumbled away from the door just as it burst open. Someone wasn't alone in the hall. That's when I saw it. A flash of silver scales glinted in the light, and my breath caught in my throat. The creature had found us. We scrambled backward, pressing against the chilling steel wall as the creature emerged from the shadows. A massive twisting figure, all dark limbs and glimmering eyes. My heart raced as I caught a glimpse of its jagged teeth, each breath sending waves of fear. "Mark!" I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was now or never. The only course of action was to take flight, but the emergency exit seemed all but an idea. "Right!" Mark yelled, shoving me toward the corridor leading away from the rampaging creature. The stranger followed close behind, throwing glances over his shoulder. The sound of heavy footsteps filled the air, pounding like a war drum, urging us on. We sprinted down the hall, the lights flickering as if caught in a strobe. My lungs burned with exertion, my heart hammering against my ribcage, each pulse echoing like a countdown to impending dread. "Over there!" Mark pointed, veering toward an adjacent corridor that split to the left. Hope surged through my chest as I followed. Would the creature be able to turn back, to know where we were? We barreled through the darkened passage, the sounds of our panting breaths mixing with the persistent low growls reverberating through the steel walls. Shadows danced ominously with every flicker of light racing above our heads. In the distance loomed a beam of light, a flicker of salvation. "It's the emergency exit," I gasped, pushing myself harder. "We can make it!" But just as victory came within reach, the creature's furious roar echoed once more, sending chills racing down my back. We skidded to a halt just as it lunged from behind, a tidal wave of darkness bursting onto the scene. "Go, now!" the stranger shouted, his voice rising over the cacophony of chaos. With no time to think, I threw myself toward the light. "Don't look back!" Mark screamed, urgency underscoring every word. We reached the door, a heavy steel barrier marked by a single red emergency sign. There was a handle, but I hesitated, fingers trembling. Panic surged within me. Would it even open? Would it be our escape or another trap? "Jake, now!" Mark said, desperation in his voice. Suddenly, from the depth of my fear, I felt a cool surge of determination. I grabbed the handle, twisting it with intention. The metal turned, and I pushed with every ounce of strength left in me. The door creaked ominously before swinging open with a shriek that echoed in the confined space, a cruel taunt against the chaos behind us. Bright floodlights streamed in as I tumbled through the opening, Mark and the stranger close behind. As I stumbled outside onto the metal deck of the rig, the salt-filled air rushed at me, carrying the crisp tang of freedom. But just as we gained our footing, the creature appeared in the doorway, a silhouette against the harsh lights, its eyes fierce and unyielding. It seemed to flicker for a moment like a mirage, as if gauging its options. "Close it!" Mark shouted. Struggling between the visceral fear for our lives and the gnawing curiosity of what lingered behind those eyes, I quickly positioned my weight against the door and yanked it shut, slamming it fast. The sound of the creature's roars muffled behind the steel reverberated around us, mitigating into a faint echo. For a moment, we stood panting in shock, adrenaline burning through our systems like fire. "I can't believe we made it," I panted, relief swelling within me. I could see the horizon, the water vibrant under the moonlight, waves crashing softly against the rig. But in the midst of our triumph, an unsettling silence washed over me. I turned to face Mark and the stranger, only to see the confusion etched on their faces, mirroring my own uncertainty. "Is it gone?" I whispered, an unease coiling deep within. I don't know," Mark replied, glancing back at the door. The certainty of escape wavered in the shadows of our experience. "What if it finds a way outside?" the stranger muttered, a hint of panic creeping back into his voice. An ominous wave passed through me. The rig was still, yes, but the sensation of being watched hung heavy in the air. Questions buzzed in my mind. Had I really escaped? Did it even matter? The night felt thick around us, concealing secrets that might never be unearthed. Gone were the creatures lurking within the shadows, but they hadn't truly left. They were still there, just below the surface, waiting. We stared at the horizon, wondering if freedom was merely an illusion, and whether we had truly escaped at all. I knew I'd never feel safe again. And as I turned back to the door, awaiting the flash of shadow at its edge, I understood that this experience had altered me in ways I might never comprehend. I stepped further into the night, my heart still racing, but didn't look back. In the haunting silence, I could still hear whispers carried by the breeze, echoes of a darker reality that lurked just beneath the surface.